What if a man who dedicates his life to protecting the nation's leaders is suddenly mistaken for a criminal? What happens when the very people sworn to uphold the law make a mistake so big that it sends shockwaves through the entire city? This is the shocking story of a government agent's nightmare, and how one mistake turned everything upside down. It was a bright, sunny afternoon in Washington, D.C. The city hummed with activity, as usual. Tourists snapped photos in front of landmarks, and locals rushed from one place to another. On the surface, everything appeared calm, but underneath that calm, something was about to erupt. A man in a sharp black suit was about to be thrown into a nightmare that would make the entire city question everything they thought they knew about justice. What if the people who are supposed to protect you turn out to be the very ones who threaten your life? What if the color of your skin is enough to get you wrongly accused, even when you're doing nothing wrong? This is the story of one man, a government agent, who became the victim of a terrible mistake, and the shocking twist that followed. Washington, D.C. was alive with the usual noise. Street vendors called out, children ran past laughing, and workers hustled on their way to meetings. In the middle of all of it was James Carter, a 38-year-old Secret Service agent. He was dressed in a crisp black suit, his steps measured and confident. His eyes were constantly scanning the area, habit formed from years of training. Always be alert. Always be aware of your surroundings. That's the way he'd been taught. But today, the danger wasn't coming from a hidden threat. No. Today, it was coming from the very people who were supposed to keep him safe. James had just finished a quick coffee break at a cafe nearby and was walking back to his car when he noticed something unsettling. Two uniformed police officers were staring at him, their eyes locked in suspicion. It wasn't the usual glance one might receive from a stranger. This was different. This was a look that screamed judgment, and James knew that look all too well. Even though he knew what was coming, James tried to remain calm. He didn't want trouble. He had done nothing wrong. He was a respected government agent, trusted to protect high-level officials. There was no reason for concern, but the officers didn't see it that way. "Hey, you!" one of them called out, his voice sharp. James turned around slowly, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, officer?" he asked, his voice steady and calm. "Where are you coming from?" The officer, a tall man with a buzz cut, stepped closer, his hand instinctively drifting toward his gun holster. James sighed. He knew where this was going. "I'm just walking to my car," James replied, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Is there a problem?" The younger officer, eager and almost aggressive, chimed in. "We got reports of suspicious activity in the area. You match the description." James glanced around. The only suspicious thing he saw was the way the officers were glaring at him. He wasn't the one causing a scene. "Is that so?" James said, his voice calm but laced with frustration. "Well, I can assure you, I haven't done anything wrong." "Hands where I can see them!" The older officer barked suddenly, his hand grabbing for his weapon. The crowd froze. A woman yanked her child back, and a man holding a sandwich stopped mid-bite. The tension was thick, like static electricity before a storm. James had been in high-pressure situations before. He had been in dangerous parts of the world, protecting the most important people in the country. But this wasn't a war zone. This was his home, and yet, he was being treated like a threat. "I'd like to show you my ID," James said, keeping his hands visible. He had nothing to hide. But the officers weren't listening. Within seconds, James found himself slammed onto the cold pavement. His cheek scraped against the rough concrete as one officer's knee pressed into his back. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the street. The crowd gasped. People pulled out their phones, recording everything. No one stepped in. No one intervened. One officer leaned down, whispering in James's ear, "People like you don't belong in places like this." James clenched his jaw, biting back the anger rising in his chest. He had protected presidents, senators, and dignitaries from real threats. But now, here he was. in his own country, treated like a criminal simply because of his skin color. Just as things seemed to escalate further, the sound of engines roared in the distance. Several black SUVs came to an abrupt stop, their tires screeching against the pavement. The doors flung open, and out stepped a group of men and women dressed in dark suits. Their presence was commanding. Then, the director of the Secret Service stepped out, walking with a sense of urgency and authority that immediately made the officers freeze. "What's going on here?" the director demanded, his voice firm and unyielding. The officers stood motionless. The younger officer's face turned pale, and the older one swallowed hard. James, still on the ground, raised his head slightly. "I'd really like to show you my ID now," he said, his voice calm despite the situation. The director's glare was cold enough to freeze anyone in their tracks. "Get those cuffs off him!" Now the officers scrambled, fumbling with the handcuffs as they tried to undo the metal. Finally, they snapped open. James pushed himself up, brushing off his suit. He turned to face the officers. His expression remained unreadable, but the crowd, now gathered around, murmured in disbelief. Phones were raised high, capturing every moment. The director stepped forward. "Do you have any idea who you just tackled?" the older officer stammered. "We thought he was—" "Thought!" the director interrupted, his voice full of disbelief. "You assaulted one of the president's personal security agents, a man who has put his life on the line for this country more times than you can count." The officer stood silent, unable to respond. It was too late. Within minutes, the video of the incident went viral. News stations picked it up. By morning, it was the top story. The officers were suspended, and an internal investigation was launched. Even the president issued a public statement condemning the actions of the officers. But for James, this incident was not just about him. It was about the countless other people who faced the same unfair treatment every day. The people who didn't have the luxury of high-ranking officials rushing to their aid. The people who didn't have the protection of cameras capturing every moment. Those who were victims of discrimination simply because of their appearance. As the media storm continued, one question remained in everyone's mind. If even a Secret Service agent isn't safe from racial profiling, who is? This brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories. Have a nice day.